All right, we are ready to rock and roll. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America. I'm Don Irvine, and I'm joined once again by Brian McNicoll.
Good morning. Hello, deplorables, drags, despicables, chomps, and dog-faced pony soldiers.
We also have a special guest today. This will take up the screen probably.
Ta-da!
So that's a squishmallow that my wife happened to see somebody carrying out of Costco, and she went to go find it. So actually, it's very being half Asian. It's a very Asian looking Yoda. When you look at the real Yoda, it's got he's a little more serious in tone. But you know something? I don't know. What is it? What is that? 61. I've got to have a Yoda, a baby Yoda.
Time has come. If not now, when?
That's right. All right. Well, there is a ton to talk about today.
I think we could just sit here and say "wow" for an hour, and people would go,
Yeah. No, I mean, okay. So I'm going to preface all of this by saying that I have said more than one occasion, I was not staying up last night. By 9 o'clock, I was in bed. I had looked at what the early results were, but I knew it was going to be a long night. I am far past the point of waiting up the way the elections are now run to stay up looking for an answer, because I just didn't think we were going to get one, no matter how long I stayed up. And that's really true. Here we are at a little bit after 11 o'clock Eastern time, and we still don't know who the president of the United States will be for sure.
Right.
Anyway, so Brian, go ahead and give me your thoughts about what's been going on here, and we'll just kind of get into it.
Well, so what's left to be determined is Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. The Trump campaign says they can win Nevada. I don't know what they're basing that on. They're only about 2/3 of the vote is counted. So, and I don't know what the third that has not. I was just trying to find that out before we started. But Trump did pretty good in Republicans did pretty good in Clark County, which is Vegas, and in Washoe County, which is Reno, in early ballot, mail in early ballot, so forth, better than they thought they would. So, I don't know what's left to count. So that's a possible flip, but it's a highly partisan Democrat governor there, and who knows. North Carolina is at they've counted about 96%. Some of the things say they've counted them all. Most of what's left is Republican, or at least slightly Republican. So, I think North Carolina, Trump will win, but it looks like they're like deciding which states they can let him win. Georgia, Trump has a lead. What's left to be counted is Fulton County, a little bit of DeKalb County. Fulton County is Atlanta, but it's also they added years ago a northern tree to Fulton County that kind of goes up all the way to Alpharetta, to help them with property tax base, basically. And so that area is Republican. And so a lot of what has not been counted in Fulton County is, believe it or not, kind of Republican. DeKalb County is about 83% for Biden at this point. So whatever gets counted there won't go good for Trump, but that could stand up. In Pennsylvania, the president has a lead of about 700,000 votes, but there are about 1 million absentee or early mail-in ballot votes to count, the governor says. So, if you have a 700,000 lead with 1 million to go, that seems to me that's fairly safe, right? That's good. You're going to have to, you would have to get about 850,000 of those votes for Biden to win Pennsylvania, right? 885%, when he's in the low 40s now. So that leaves Michigan. Let's see, where did I leave out? Arizona.
Yeah, Arizona.
But Arizona, Biden is ahead. But in Arizona, they voters all over the state, but especially in Maricopa County, which is the Valley of the Sun, the Phoenix area, voters are saying, and I have confirmed this with people who vote there this morning, 2 different people, that they were given Sharpies to mark their ballot. Sharpies don't show up in those machine, scanners, right? So it's like they did not vote. So now there's like a question, what do we do with those votes? Do we get the ones that were marked with Sharpies out and hand count them? So that will be a controversy. And, the Trump campaign still thinks they can win Arizona. I have not seen the movement there on any of the stuff that they've talked about that would put him over the top, but they are optimistic about that. They're also optimistic they can win Nevada, which, so we will see. That leaves us Michigan and Wisconsin. Now, probably about the time you were waking up, right? You may have woke up to the big news, because I fell asleep about 3:40 in the morning. And it was only part of why I look this bad. I usually look pretty bad a little bit.
I thought you were fresh as a daisy.
But in both cases, in Michigan, they dumped one trench of votes from Wayne County, the Detroit area. There was 138,339 to 0 for Biden. So somebody went and got 138,339 votes for Biden. I don't believe you can stand anywhere in this country and say the nearest 138,000 people bring me a ballot, and either candidate would get all those ballots. I just don't believe that that's possible. Okay. But, that's just me. So now Trump is slightly behind in Michigan. John James, the Senate candidate there, who was leading and looked well on his way to victory, also now slightly behind. In Wisconsin, someone dumped a tranche of ballots from Milwaukee County, which is obviously the most liberal part of the state, of 112,000 votes to none for Trump. So in one state, you had 138,000. The other one, you had 112,000 to 0 in both cases. So obviously, we're a long way from done with this.
Yeah. So let me ask you about this then. So this is an interesting thing because, one of my concerns about this election in a lot of areas which has become, which we learned a heck of a lot about 2 years ago, was ballot harvesting. So my question to you would be, is that in ballot harvesting, which this could possibly be, is this a case of where they're going to, when they do collect these votes, they're only collecting one party votes? I mean, how would that be? Is that even possible that they would, even if they're trying to collect all these ballots, that they could do that? Is that anywhere reasonable?
I'm saying that election officials are saying, "Hey, we found a new box of ballots."
Yeah.
And those are the contents. So this is not, what was brought to the door. This was already in the door. So
that's strange. I mean, this also reminds me of that whole, Al Franken, Norm Coleman race, right?
This is that on steroids. And I mean, that's a lot of votes to flip those 2 states, which seemed, and what happened was you got to a point last night where Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. I mean, you have he has a 14-point lead in Pennsylvania with more than 2/3 counted. Most of the time, 99% of the time, we call that race, right? But they, oh no, don't call it. We don't know what's out there. Blah 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 blah. So, they have stopped counting. They stopped counting, right? And then all of a sudden, 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. Boom, boom, boom. Here comes all these votes that totally change the nature of the race, right? All these states suddenly within about a 20-minute period say, hey, we're not counting anymore tonight. Okay, first of all, when have we not counted all the way to the end? When have we not found the result? I remember when we go back and contest it, Bush v. Gore, they announced something, right? It took them a long time. And then they said, okay, Bush barely wins. And then the lawyers all went to work, and it took a long time to settle it. But that night, you knew the denouement of Florida. You knew what happened. You had the results in hand. And so these are like, we don't really know, and we're stopping getting any more certain about it until we let you know. Okay, the other wild card out there is here in Fairfax County, Virginia, they found 100,000 votes added to the Biden campaign incorrectly and took them off. Now, I don't know. His lead is a little more than that. I don't know where that stands, and is that enough to do it? And obviously, what they're counting today is early in person and absentee ballots in Fairfax and maybe a couple of other counties in the state. Obviously, that looks like it probably will go to Biden. He will win today, whatever gets counted today, or he should, and would win Virginia then. But it's kind of interesting, how that happened.
Yeah, so I mean, I know there have been some conservatives that have complained about Fox, because Fox had early called Arizona for Biden. But as you're saying here, I mean, the thing is that I mean, Trump is trailing by a fairly decent amount of votes here. It is going to be an uphill slog for them,
in Arizona.
To overcome that.
I will say this about Arizona. They keep saying, wait for this, wait for that in Arizona, our guys. And I haven't seen anything that cracks the dam in Arizona at all.
Well, one of the things is that I watch both. I could have both CNN and Fox News running this morning. And while Fox has called Arizona, CNN would not. They were holding back. Nevada, which is a shocking thing that that Biden didn't win it. Trump's efforts there might possibly pay off there. That the fact that he is even that competitive, I think, is already unsettling to the Democrats at this point in time. I mean, even this morning on CNN, one of the states that they had not put into the Democrat camp was Maine. I mean, this was strange. I think you tweeted out earlier this morning or at some point in time about North Carolina, you're talking about the calling, that, you saw how many more votes were left, and, mathematically it wasn't possible for Biden to overcome it. So what in the heck are they waiting for with this? What's your feeling about the effect of mail-in ballots in terms of slowing down the count in some of these areas? I mean, some states could count them early. Other states, I guess, had to wait until sometime yesterday, and maybe are not still now counting them now. If mail-in balloting becomes a standard feature throughout the United States in the future, I mean, what are future elections going to look like?
Right. It looks like a tool for, I mean, to me, whatever happens in this thing, there's going to be a lot of doubt about this election. Whoever wins it now, there's going to be a lot of trouble about it, because, what happened, and you got it, if you were, Biden followers have to say, if you were sitting there and Trump got 138,000 votes in one state, 112,000 in another, at 4 o'clock in the morning, 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, you'd be asking some serious questions, right? I mean, you can't not. So, and the lawyers are all, every plane in America right now is full of lawyers going somewhere to fight some of this. So, the effect of it is to reduce confidence in the results of the election. I think that, it's hard to get a lot of good, solid takes, out of things so far, since we don't really know what's happening. But, that's one of them is, no matter what happens, no matter how this ends, someone is going to doubt the efficacy of taking the country so drastically in the mail-in direction. Other thing, you're talking about early calls. Fox called Virginia with 9 precincts reporting last night. And with both Trump and the U.S. Senate candidate here, Republican Senate candidate here, with sizable leads out of the 9 precincts. So to me, it's like, first of all, I don't think we're in such a hurry to call races that you can't say, we should wait till the guy is actually has at least a 1 vote lead before we say that it's insurmountable. I think if I was them, I would have held back. But they have their reasons for doing it. It looks like they're going to be right. So on that one, and probably Arizona. So it is what it is on that. As for Fox, so your timeline and mine, over the last year, 18 months, there's been a lot of disillusion among the right with what is becoming of Fox, right? It's kind of drifted toward the other side. And they're sort of almost like jilted lovers, they sort of look for their little chance to stick you, and the way things were called, the way things were handled and discussed last night, and the way they brought on their decision desk guys to talk about it and so forth, they made a lot of enemies last night. And I'm kind of not in the cable wars, but I can tell you that Fox put its direction down last night. They put their marker down and said, we're not you anymore, we're sort of them. And it'll be interesting to see what happens, because their sins to this point had been sort of overlookable, because you tune in, the hardcore people, Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham, we're not going to stop watching them over this. But now people are going to look at, I don't want to give Fox ratings anymore, no matter who it is. So, a lot of bitterness about that, and I don't know how they walk it back.
Yeah, I mean, Fox's situation is not being helped by Trump, because the president is a little bit kind of back and forth on that. I mean, he understands that appearing on Fox is important for him because it's a huge audience. It's the largest in cable news. So you reach more people than any other fashion. On the other hand, he is not afraid to criticize them. I mean, I think he went on yesterday morning and he did criticize them, which put the hosts a little bit on their heels about this. So he'll do that. His focus had normally been towards the weekend hosts and the things like that, not as much during the weekday stuff. But, President Trump has been, I mean, if there's one thing about him, is that he's very good about sowing the seeds of doubt into people's minds about things. And he throws those things out there, kind of like, you've just mentioned about, vote, how legitimate is the vote? Well, President Trump has been on that, kind of bandwagon of just throwing that out there a little bit, whether or not it's true. He throws that out, and he is casting doubt about the legitimacy of the election results. His base is going to react to this. Yes, there are going to be lawyers that we have, I'm guessing about 33 days or something like that before they have to be certified, and then another week, I guess, before the Electoral College votes. So there's time there, but the clock is going to be ticking very fast here in terms of trying to figure this out. And yeah, I mean, should lawyers be involved based on some of the things you said? Absolutely. They need to be looking at this stuff. There's some funny things going on here with all of this. And we still have, the Pennsylvania thing. I mean, they are segregating the votes that'll be received today, tomorrow, that have postmarks. I was trying to initially understand about this, even if it didn't have a postmark or was illegible, as long as it didn't look like it had been fudged, or forged or something else, they would count it. And I'm like, this is why you take the votes on election day. That's it. I don't, if they arrive, even if they're postmarked that day, this is not that kind of a thing that you've got to turn them in. I don't understand why people can't get their votes in by a ballot box or get it in the mail. Normally, the ballots have been received. If you requested a mail-in ballot, you have received one. I mean, I look at what happened in Maryland. I requested mine early, and it actually took weeks before I got mine. My wife requested hers. She'd been away. We kind of lollygagged a little bit. She put hers in less than 2 weeks, and she got it back in about 5 days. So, it can happen. And, we turned them in pretty quickly. So we were done with that. We were done with that process. But I know from my own experience that, yes, you can get the ballots early enough and in plenty of time to get them back in the mail. If you're procrastinating and your vote comes in, the next day, that's your problem. That is not the Board of Elections problem. There's a date. This moving of the dates drives me absolutely insane and creates these situations where we're going to be left hanging on a lot of these things. My feeling here is that, yes, Georgia, I think that goes for Trump. I think he's got that, and I think he's got North Carolina. The thing is that he has to get, Michigan. He's got to get Wisconsin. I think Arizona's done. I'm giving Nevada to Biden, but he's got to get
one of those in Pennsylvania, one of Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania.
Yeah, he's got to get. Yeah, he's got. Yeah, right. He's got to get those, and if he gets those, he's fine. But the path for Biden at this stage on the surface looks a lot easier, but not impossible. So my initial projection, when I did that 270 to win website, was I had at 280. He could actually get to 280 if he wins those states. But at the same point in time, Biden could come across. This could be a situation where the winner is at like 273 or 270. Barely over the top, but still good enough to do it. The blue wave that the Democrats have been pounding the table for and predicting and everything, that surely didn't happen in this case. No. Even if Biden wins, it is not a blue wave based on what we've seen for the results, right?
It's barely eked out, and they did not retake the Senate and lost some House seats, lost about 6 or 7 House seats.
Yeah, so this is not a great night for the Democrats in terms of what they thought they were going to get. If they win the presidency, that's a good night for them in that sense. But if the Senate stays in Republican hands, then Biden is still tied up a little bit, because Republican Senate they're not going to pass the majority of the things that they want. The Democrats are going to try to shove through. And I think the stock market reflects some of that. At least the initial results earlier this morning I think the futures were up. I think this is the kind of thing that they want. They either want the Trump victory in a Republican Senate, or they'll live with a Biden victory and a Republican Senate. It's just giving all the branches over to the Democrats was just not going to be feasible to them. But if there's a divided government, that's actually probably good for investors in the long run. Now, we should also look at. I do want to ask you though, in Virginia, because I didn't look at the results in Virginia. How did the Virginia candidates do? How did Gabe do? How's the House look in Virginia from your perspective?
Well, Gabe got clobbered, which at the end of it, he didn't have the money to compete. He made Warner spend a lot of money. There were a lot of commercials on the last weekend that were Warner and not one of him. And the commercials weren't all that great, but if it's like all from one side, that was bad for him. Big pickup in the House. Nick Freitas defeated Abigail Spanberger down in the district down around Charlottesville, that part of the world. Freitas was up to run. He was in a primary against Corey Stewart to run against Tim Kaine in 2018. Kaine was kind of vulnerable. He'd just come off a bad experience as vice presidential candidate in 2016 and could have been knocked off, but we chose, through whatever Byzantine formula the Republican Party of Virginia came up with, we chose Corey Stewart, and he went and got clobbered and, easily depicted as a racist and all this stuff. So, Virginia hopefully is learning to get the right candidates into the right spots to be able to win some of these races. He's a libertarian leaning conservative and very popular all around the state. So he could be bigger things for him. And they won. Bob Odom won in Virginia 3. Rob Whitman won. I think there's 1 or 2 still out. My district here, it was 2-1 for the Democrat Connolly. Virginia 10. The Wexton won re-election. She knocked off Barbara Comstock. And last night she won again, but it was pretty close. It was 6 points or so, which is, it's holding their own. Also, interesting development. Trump won Loudoun County. Loudoun County Lyndon LaRouche used to call it the epicenter of the oligarchy, right? It was run by right-wing oligarchs. His headquarters were in Leesburg, up in Loudon. So, but then, it's been the fastest growing county in the nation for 2 of the last 3 years, and it has swung hard left. But Trump won it last night, about 3 or 4 points. So that was kind of an interesting development too. He also Trump doesn't appear to have it can change by the time we see all the results and what happened to this 100,000 votes and whatnot. But I don't believe he will win Fairfax as big as he did last time. So the margins got knocked down. And as for the lady who lost here in Virginia 11, she wasn't really that great a candidate, and she didn't really understand how to use the facts she had on her side. But she only lost 2-1. So I mean, there's more Republican sentiment in the 11th district and in a lot of Northern Virginia than there was in the 2016 cycle. Not a whole lot more, and not enough to win yet, but it did move in a positive direction.
Only lost 2-1. Sounds like something could happen in Montgomery County. Yeah,
but I mean, you get to run up. You know how it is. You got to go run up negatives. You got to go prepare the way for somebody else to actually clinch it.
Yeah, and Spanberger, I mean, that was a seat she had flipped, right, 2 years ago. So we get that back. I mean, this was one of the things for the Democrats too, is that they had flipped a lot of seats in 2018 that had been Republican seats, and they were potentially the most vulnerable House members out there, and a lot of them lost around the country. They were one-termers. I mean, I have Donna Shalala was a name I saw, that lost her seat, and I was like, oh, that just makes me feel good. That's one of the highlights of my night, in essence. I just have never really liked Donna Shalala. So,
other than the top line, it wasn't a bad night. Tom Tillis appears to have won. Susan Collins has a big lead. Haven't been declared yet, but.
So okay. Now you mentioned Collins. Now here's something I heard on CNN. I don't know what the last results were for Collins. What the current ones are. I know what they were about. What was like 7 hours ago or something. And what they were showing there was just that she had the lead, but she did not have the majority, right? It was a plurality at that point. It was 49.6 or whatever. They were saying there that in Maine, if you don't get 50%, they then go to ranked choice voting, which gives Gideon a shot at still winning. So that apparently is a key there, is that Collins has got to get to the 50% mark to avoid the ranked choice, which is a complete mess, in my opinion. That's another Democrat, tool
right.
that they put in there. But Susan Collins is a very resilient candidate. If there is ever anyone who has faced some tough fights over the last few elections, it's been her, and she's usually come out on top. Amazingly so. I mean, the Democrats in Maine have got to be going like, what in the hell do we have to do to beat this woman?
Because I mean, and Republicans are like, you got to put up with a lot of nutty stuff from her and realize she's going to abandon you sometimes, right? Yeah. But on the day they organize the Senate, she votes correctly, and that's what matters.
Right. And Georgia will be interesting because I guess Purdue, once again, my results going back hours, is that he had like 50.5% against Ossoff. So that would avoid a runoff. I mean, Georgia they have a very strange election law, is that if you do not get 50%, you have to go into a runoff, which I believe is like January 5th.
Yeah.
So Loeffler and what the other guy's name was, which his name's escaped me, I think they're headed to a runoff probably, right? But Purdue was just over the margin there to do that. But they had counted 92% of the vote, or they were already with high numbers in terms of that. So I think Purdue holds on and wins that seat outright. Whereas and my belief is that if it's Loeffler and the Democrat in a one-on-one race like that, then I think Loeffler wins. I think Georgia stays Republican in that sense, and they keep that seat as well. So that's good. So McSally is probably out. We knew Gardner was gone. Michigan, you just mentioned John James. We'll have to wait and see. He was in the lead. He's behind now. Can he make another run there, and can he wind up on top? possibly. Yeah, Tillis probably retains a seat. But the Democrats, what they thought their
Hillis,
path.
by the way, an interesting race because it kind of turned. It was working all against him, and news came out that his opponent had an affair, and with the wife of a staffer or someone, and it got kind of like this weird triangle thing going on and everything. And you don't think about, you think about, Biden, met his wife while she was a campaign fling and became the babysitter and pushed out the other wife. And Trump's been married 3 times and been accused of all this stuff, and Biden's been accused of stuff. And we've gotten to the point where, like, since Clinton, those things don't really matter, right? We've sort of gotten used to, they're going to do stuff along those lines that we don't like, and there's nothing we can do about it, and we're not going to let it affect how we vote, But here's one where it did turn the race; it did make a difference. So, it's
Yeah,
kind of
we had.
interesting.
I've met a guy through one of the things that I do, and he's in law school, but he also works, in the legislature. And initially after Cal Cunningham's revelations, he was saying, North Carolina polls were not moving. Till the expectation was from Republicans is that Tillis would gain a big advantage, and he didn't. And then this probably goes a little bit to your point. It's like we learn that a lot of these things don't seem to really matter. It's to me, it's like, okay, this should matter, but it wasn't really making a big deal. It may in the end have hurt Cal Cunningham. That may have tipped the scales where he could have beaten Tillis, and that may have done it, but not to the degree that, say, 30 years ago or something like that, that would have had a bigger effect or whatever. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I think the Clinton effect that has had, over the years, and celebrities, personalities, whether or not it's, Rush Limbaugh, who's been married several times, the Newt Gingrich thing, we've seen this happen. So, I think there's a lot of people tuning a lot of those things out with wives. It's the when you're in the middle of a campaign and then all of a sudden you've had this affair exposed, I think people ought to be making some kind of a judgment on that. It's like, exactly who are you, on
I mean,
this?
if they're both, I mean, what do you do about president, right? Because you can't choose a candidate,
Right,
Go
right. And,
Joe Jorgensen.
right. And one of the interesting things about this is that, I have seen, I'm sure you have seen, a number of stories over the last several days on the campaign, is just that, and I think we've talked about it on the show too, is the massive cash advantage that the Democrats had in these races, whether or not it's Biden or whatever. I mean, Jamie Harrison spent an ungodly sum of money, and he lost by big numbers. I mean, so is cash, is the money influence becoming less and less in this kind of a thing?
I think money does matter. I think that, like, at the end of it, the Democrats had a lot more to spend. They, every commercial I saw over the weekend was Biden. There was one. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say everyone. There was a PAC that was running commercials for Trump. Now, this is an expensive media buy, and you're not gonna buy Washington media for weeks on end, right? But Biden had the money to dump a bunch of ads at the end, and Trump didn't, or chose not to, or whatever, for whatever reason. But they didn't have the money. They didn't spend the money. So, it did make some difference. So, that's a good thing to bring up, though. But what did make a difference? The rally sizes. I mean, they told you something about Ohio and Pennsylvania, and remains to be seen about Wisconsin and Michigan. They didn't tell you anything about Arizona, right? That was pretty good clocking for, what we all thought would be a really competitive, if not Trump advantage race, right? His rallies out there were ginormous. They had a 96-mile car parade, through from Pima County, which is Tucson's liberal area, right? So, I mean, it's what did matter and what didn't was kind of interesting. Polls seem to have guided rather than informed. So that's another thing to think about. So, the pollsters, everyone's sitting around saying how wrong they are today. Like, their thing was not to be, right. Their thing was to get you to vote for Biden, to, an inevitability persuasion. And they did. It worked.
Yeah, I mean, I thought for sure we were going to see Biden run up some pretty good numbers with the popular vote, have a pretty sizable advantage over Trump on the popular vote. Uh, but that's not going to happen, is it? It's
No,
going to be,
it looks like about 2.5 million.
yeah, it's going to be pretty close overall. Even after they count all the votes, it's not going to be as large as I had thought. And so that'll be a very narrow victory. There's no mandate there with a narrow victory that way. And, the polling, I mean, I saw Frank Luntz on CNBC. One of the things he said this morning was just that he says, where are the apologies from CNN for how badly they missed this? They had their numbers were way off on this kind of a thing. And Luntz has been talking, I think, initially too about if polling is wrong, all the pro Biden stuff, if Biden doesn't win this, what does that say for polling? Political polling. I mean, I think even 538 is going to have, also there's, I think they called a lot of things. They, Ohio, you mentioned Ohio, that was supposed to be darn close, and it looks like Trump has run away with it. Right. So, Florida was considered to be, a lot closer than it was and stuff like that.
Biden was considered to be ahead. The last week of the campaign, a poll said that, I think it was like a ABC Washington Post said Trump was 17 points behind in Wisconsin. Obviously, Biden may win Wisconsin, but it's not going to be by 17 points.
Yeah, and the Democrats were, they were trying to say that, Texas was in play. I mean, it was what, 6 points maybe or something like that or whatever, but not really in play. I mean, I think we scoffed at the notion that Texas could turn blue this time around. But, it's the Democrats, I don't know, they bought into some kind of somebody's juju juice that they had all this, they were going to get like 350 to 400 electoral votes on this, which the pipe dream. I will say anybody on either side, to me, talking about 350 electoral college votes on either side was smoking something. That I don't think, to me, that was never going to be a possibility. I think it had to be under 300 was going to be, and it was going to be, a relatively, what did I say, 280? So that would have left what, 258 or whatever it was, for my, so, I think those were much more reasonable things. If you're at 280, 290, but 275, those were the areas where you could say we're probably going to be relatively close. But when you're at 300 and something, that was just not reasonable. That was extreme optimism, but not really at looking at what was likely to be the outcome for these races. With the Senate losing, what they're going to lose, maybe a couple seats in the end, maybe a 51-49. Is that probably going to be the number more or less?
Right.
We'll see how that really shakes out. So, McConnell will still be in charge, it looks like. How much does this hurt McConnell losing a couple of senators? I mean, he still has a majority, but now it's really razor thin.
Depends on what comes up. Romney's thing was to stick it to Trump, not really to Mitch, right?
Right.
Maybe if Trump was out of the picture, Romney stays on the reservation a little more. So you don't know. Depends on what they're being asked to vote on. So,
what if something happens to Justice Breyer in the first 2 years?
You're going to have to confirm, put up a justice and fight your way through it. And, if the guy's suitable, that, we don't really do that. Right. So, I mean, the thing with Merrick Garland, I mean, it was months, right? Scalia died in March. We got the nominee in late April. So, that was kind of a different thing. So, now you could probably see Breyer retire. Now you will see Clarence Thomas hanging on.
Right.
So, it'll be interesting, and I think there is a limit, and they'll have to do business on some stuff.
And then we also have the House with losses of 5, 6, 7 seats, maybe. Who knows? The counting in California probably still will take a while. I think. I mean, we had a long delay 2 years ago. I wouldn't be surprised that we see delays along those lines this time around as well. But the Republicans look like they were doing fairly well, particularly in the seats that flipped last time, which really, the Wall Street Journal had, there was an article, there'd been an op-ed piece this past week about how the Republicans' chances in California in the House were actually pretty good. And, at least the initial vote showed that they were doing fairly well, and they could flip back some seats. How much of an effect, the same kind of question, Nancy Pelosi winds up with a slightly narrower majority. Does this mean a lot to her? She's going to wind up with more squad type people, right?
Right. Well, one thing I see is it might not be Nancy Pelosi who's doing this, right? I think there's going to be an all-out war for speaker. They don't have to put up with her. And I think if they, honest assessment, she's not a good speaker, right? She's gotten rolled on everything she's tried to do with Trump. And, she doesn't really speak for the ascendant wing of the party right now. So, we'll see, but I'm looking at that and I don't know that she's back as speaker. One thing though, about going back to the campaign and so forth, a lot of these things that we were, told we're coming home, where we're going to work and so forth, didn't really pan out. So for instance, we said Trump got 8% of the black vote in 2016. And, the word was that he would get double that or more this time. Doesn't look like that happened, right? It looks like it's going to be maybe 9, 10 at the most, or not any more than that. So you had also nothing really flipped except Arizona. Everything else kind of went pro forma. So the idea that there was, some kind of transformative electoral mark left on the country, that didn't happen.
All right. Now, what happens? Okay, if Biden captures Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, wins the presidency, does that mean that he has put the blue wall back into effect for future elections? Or are these elections so close that they will be battleground, they will be in play for the next Republican nominee as well, if they're a good, strong nominee?
Well, did you think in 2016 that there was now a red wall through the upper Midwest? That's basically, what's happening there now is the reverse of what happened there in 2016. So, I think you'll identify different battlegrounds, and I think they'll identify different ways of attacking it. But if Trump loses, which is a very real possibility at this point, the Republican Party has got some thinking to do. Like, what does it want to be next time, right? Because going back to being the traditional Republican Party is a non-starter. It's got to be done somewhat in the way Trump was doing it. It also could be done by Trump. It would not surprise me at all if Trump was, a candidate and a strong candidate in 2024.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. That even never crossed my mind. But believe it or not, I actually saw a Lincoln Project ad on television this morning. All right. And just hitting the Republican Party hard and all this kind of stuff, which feeds into all the liberal media narrative that we've seen about, if Trump loses, it'll just be kind of the nail in the coffin of the Republican Party. He has brought down the Republican Party. Now, part of that narrative also, was that they were expecting this blue wave and that they expected the Republicans to get wiped out in the Senate and things like that. As we've discussed, we are not seeing that. And even if Biden wins, he'll win by a thin margin. So even if Trump loses, the Republican Party, I think you're right. I think they have to think about what they want, where they want to be and what they want to go. But to me, by no stretch of the imagination, does that mean that Donald Trump and the reshaping the Republican Party was a failure, right?
No, not at all. And it's like, look what it took to beat it. Right.
Right. And whether or not, I mean, the idea that, that if Trump tries to come back in 2024, which would be interesting, but it also to me sets the stage for a Trump-like candidate on the Republican side.
Yeah, but who is that?
I don't know who that is,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
it's like,
yeah.
it's hard to be Trump.
Well, it's also saying, like, where the Republicans have been waiting for another Reagan. Who is that, right?
And but some people, I mean, the Reagan ideologically could be aped, could be imitated to some degree, right? You could push for the same things, but it's not about pushing for things anymore. Like, I wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago. It's like, it's not, the issues were raised on both candidates. I remember looking at the last night of the campaign, and there's Biden standing there and go, I did not say I was going to ban fracking, and it's like, your final argument is to deny something that you got accused of, that you did, right? That you in fact did. And, you can't get out from under it in an big energy state. One of the few good positive surprises is, the Republicans appear to have overperformed in Pennsylvania. But, issues weren't a thing, right? What we normally think of as like tax policy. Biden's like, I'm going to raise your taxes. Day one, I'm going to start raising your taxes. Who says that on a campaign trail, right? But he did publicly. So, we have to rethink, like, what is a political issue in the country. The other things is we got to rethink, if we're going to do mail-in voting and so forth, what are the standards? So when should you count those first? Should you count those last? What do you do with them when you get them? How do you make sure they're not adulterated? They're guarded and so forth. Like, Karl Rove was talking about, as soon as they said that Pennsylvania was going to stop counting for the night, he goes, guard the ballots. Get on over there. Now's the time. The other thing is the court rulings on this. And, it shows you one of the problems with the press is so allied with one group or the other. So, instead of being objective, right, that, every one of those court decisions that came out, like Republicans get big win, Democrats get big win, right? But no one ever took the time to explain, like, what did the court rule? On what basis did they say that, for instance, Minnesota had to have everything counted by the end of last night, but Pennsylvania could accept things and keep them indefinitely and count them next week or whatever it is they've been allowed to do. How did that go before the same court and both of those things get allowed? So, it must not have had anything to do with how long they wanted to wait to report their results. But what was it? Is it deference to state election law? Is it, constitutional rights emanating from somewhere? It's like, we never really knew. So one thing I would like to know is, what was the legal basis for those rulings? How were they arrived at? Because I looked and looked and looked for that, and all you found was the partisan account of those stories.
Do you think that this will lead to any push by the Democrats for some kind of national standards on election law about these types of things?
Because everything is going to push to national. I don't know about that, because they like the idea of being able to, if you're going to have an electoral college, you need to have a system in place that they had last night, where they can help themselves where they need to have help at the end of the day. Actually makes winning these elections a little easier. If they had to come up, if they had to overcome a big popular vote imbalance, for instance, that'd be harder to do, right? And you'd know where it came from and you'd know who to single out. But this is, you're in your little state and you're guarded, and no one really has authority over that but that state.
Does a Biden win mean the discussion about reforming the Electoral College is dead for now?
Well, it served them well, and they are pretty kind of optimistic folks. So it'll be interesting to see. They may not do it. They may say, hey, we won by 2.5 million votes. And, although Trump could catch up the next time, or whoever it is, in terms of electoral votes, it's harder to make up that 2.5 million. So they may well go after it.
If Trump loses, what am I going to do about this guy?
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about that this morning. This is probably the worst news we've ever discussed on this show,
Yeah,
right?
probably so. That's right. We've been doing
I
it
mean,
for a
it's
few years,
kind of
but
been a steadily, ascendant rise of good news, right?
yeah, didn't we start
Even
this around 2016?
2016, and it's
Yeah,
gone up since. And now
yeah.
we face, here's a day when like a shocking turn of events, and no one knows where it goes from here.
So, what are your feelings about a Biden presidency?
So one of the things you were talking about the Senate, Biden will not, you know, he will not like try to overcome people and force them into doing stuff. And he has a little more collegial relationship with some of those people up there. And you might be surprised at some of the stuff they do. So they're able to try to get done. I also think that, some hideous things are going to happen. We're going to go back to being a friend of Iran and enemy of Israel, even though that's the dumbest possible strategy in the Middle East. It'll be interesting to see like how much of that he wants to unwind, considering the success Trump has had with it. Um, Energy, you're paying $2 a gallon now. You better go like stuff a bunch of tanks full because they want to, change that, and you'll be looking at $4 or more pretty soon. He wants to end all domestic energy production. That's a disaster for the economy. That's a disaster for energy. That's a big tax on poor people. Hopefully he won't get too far. The turtle can keep him from those things. Domestic, you'll see, probably a public option unless McConnell can figure out a way to stop it. So it's a long list of stuff that could be really bad, and there are a few things that might end up being pretty good. So,
okay, all right, 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Well, this week, as of tonight, actually, the MAC starts tonight, the Mid-America Conference in football, 4 games. And then on Saturday, the Pac-12 starts, and that will be all conferences in college football playing football. Finally, here we are on November 4th. So it also looks like down here in Virginia, we will have sports in the schools. The governor has ordered that, the school systems begin the programs. We will start they're going to do is winter, spring, fall. So, we winter people, basketball will go first. Our tryouts, I believe I'm seeing interest meeting notes and stuff for next week. And then I'm seeing tryouts the first week of December. And then a very packed, tight schedule to get all these games in. And I believe like my whole season will be over by January 26th or something. So it'll be a blizzard for a while. And then we don't know about youth basketball and so forth because it'll depend on schools, the liability, dealing with liability problems and so forth. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Just so when Pac-12 starts playing, I mean, I didn't look through it. I know you know this. Have they been included in the top 25 rankings up to this point in time?
They went out and now they're back in.
Okay.
This week's polls included them.
Okay. All right. My 2 minutes is just a send off to Sean Connery, switching up a little bit. The best James Bond of my lifetime. I really enjoyed him. Very debonair, different than Daniel Craig and a lot of the other guys. Just loved him, and I loved him in Hunt for Red October. Very versatile actor. Great guy. Passed away at 90 over the weekend. He will be missed, but very I saw a thing in the Wall Street Journal the other day with an interview with John Cleese, and also one of my favorite guys. And he's 81 years old, and he's living on some island or something. Yeah. And so it's kind of funny with him. We're at the age, Brian, where we are losing some of these people that we've known from our childhood.
Yeah, it's hard. It's like we've gone through a lot of like my favorite musicians are starting to die off and whatnot. Yeah. When I would work for Tom Davis on Capitol Hill, Tom had a picture of him and Sean Connolly, and there was another guy in the picture. And he would show the picture to people, and he would say, that's me, and that's Sean Connolly. And the third guy is more famous, or was more famous than both of us. And you look real closely, and the other picture was Mark Foley. the guy that raided the intern houses, right?
Oh my goodness, yeah. That's a
Commemorate.
name I haven't heard from for a while.
Yeah, and for about 3 months, right? Mark Foley was a lot better known to most Americans than Sean Connery. So sadly, but
Yeah. All right. Yeah, that's good. That's yeah. We could go on to Jeffrey Tubin, but I'm not going to go there either. All right. Well, anyway, thank you everyone for joining us. Hope you enjoyed our show today and our analysis. Please like, share, retweet, do all the things that you normally do. Please, and be safe, be well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. God bless America, and we'll see you next week. And maybe we'll know who the president is by then.
And you know what? It's the greatest country in the world, however this comes out.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
America. We'll figure it out.
And we didn't see the riots that people were predicting, so we're doing okay. All right, everyone. Have a great week, and we'll see what happens.